Eurocom is responsible for many entries within the James Bond franchise. Their first game was the N64 version of The World Is Not Enough. This studio had big shoes to fill since this would be the follow-up to Goldeneye on the N64. While not a groundbreaking title, this underrated shooter is one of the best on the N64 and a quality game. The single player was solid and used the formula that Goldeneye had built, along with improving the multiplayer by providing bots. During the PS2 era, Eurocom was offered to make a completely original Bond story. Nightfire is easily one of the best Bond games, and it might be Eurocom's finest work within the franchise. The campaign is excellent with a wealth of variety, exciting shooting, along with quality vehicle-based levels. Some levels even allowed for multiple approaches along with exploration. The multiplayer made a return and was a solid element of the game as well. During the 360 era, the idea of exploring the original Goldeneye was being brought up. Nintendo wanted to release it on their Virtual Console. Rare was attempting to remaster it for the 360, and then Activision was interested in remaking it for modern audiences. This resulted in Eurocom being granted the keys to remake the original Goldeneye for the Wii. Join me as we take a look back at the Goldeneye remake. During the Wii's life, Nintendo was looking to add the original Goldeneye to their Virtual Console. The rights with Bond were a bit of a mess at the time. Nintendo had the rights to the original Goldeneye, Activision had the game rights, and Rare, the developer of the original, was owned by Microsoft. At the same time, Rare was making a remaster of their original Goldeneye and planned on releasing it on the Xbox 360. Through disagreements between Microsoft and Nintendo, the game never received an official release. Activision did like this idea of exploring Goldeneye, but as a remake. Activision thought it was a good idea to approach Crytek UK, which had many of the prior developers of the original game after they left Rare. Sadly, a deal was never finalized between the two. Eurocom has a long history with the 007 franchise. Their first project was with The World Is Not Enough on the N64. Following this, they created a completely original Bond game with Nightfire on the PS2, and is regarded as one of the best in the series. When Activision acquired the license from EA, Eurocom worked with them to create a PS2 version of Quantum of Solace. But this Bond game was not their main focus with Activision. Activision provided Eurocom the opportunity to make the Goldeneye remake, and they jumped at this opportunity. The goal was to focus on a Wii title, since there is a history with Goldeneye being on a Nintendo system, with it being originally released on the N64. And at the same time, there were not many first-person shooters on the Wii. Eurocom was not interested in making a shot-for-shot remake of the original and in the same gameplay style. This was going to be more of a reimagining that was something new and hopefully respected the original as well. First thing they knew they wanted to focus on was providing a nice fresh coat of paint to the game by using modern tech to build the game from the ground up. The developers felt it was important to maintain a lot of elements about the original Goldeneye within their remake. The original provided environments that allowed for different tactics along with additional objectives, and these were two key elements that the studio made sure to include when developing their game. This would allow players to get a lot of replay value out of the campaign, along with having multiple options for how they tackle the levels. As such, many levels would allow for players to play stealthy with silenced weapons and takedowns, along with choosing to take a more direct, action-focused approach. With the modernization approach, Goldeneye would feature a regenerating health system. As a means to blend the original and this modern version, there would be a difficulty that would not have any health regeneration and present a more traditional HUD like in the original, and players would then need to hunt down body armor for additional protection. The Goldeneye remake would also include a first-person cover system of sorts that would allow for the player to use different objects for cover and then pop out to attack your enemies. The flip side to this is how many pieces of cover could be destroyed and damaged, leaving the player now open to an attack. While the N64 version was limited in what story it could provide from the film. This is something that Eurocom wanted to expand on with their game. They wanted to provide more cutscenes and stunt moments that were not possible for the original. When it came to the story, the team was able to acquire one of the writers from the Goldeneye film to provide the story for this new version. The writer described this process as providing a refresh of sorts to make the story better fit the 21st century, while also incorporating the changes that would be needed by having Daniel Craig in the role of Bond rather than Brosnan. The film production company for Bond also felt that there really is only one actor in the role for Bond at one time, so they heavily suggested that Craig be featured in this title. Along with this, it fit with Eurocom wanting to have this game be more modernized to the original story. This included dropping the Cold War aspect about the original's plot and then bringing in a more modern banking crisis story. The writer wanted to respect the original while also providing some changes to it as well. The framework of the original would be there, but there would be many differences at play. For one, the first few levels were really going to take time to provide moments to build that friendship between Bond and Trevelyan. One aspect that Eurocom was very excited to reimagine was the famous tank level from the original and film. Eurocom aimed to take this sequence and crank up the action to 11. The studio was in an interesting situation where they wanted to respect the original while also making something new and more modern for the audience. They hoped that this approach would allow this game to blend elements from current first-person shooters with classic elements from the original. While the game did eventually come to the 360 and PS3, the original release for the remake was on the Wii. In November 2010, Goldeneye was released to the world. The Goldeneye remake is a first-person shooter. The gameplay is a nice mix of direct action and stealth situations. A large majority of the game's levels allow you to tackle them how you want. There's some alternative paths and nice options for both loud action and silent precision. There's some elements incorporated from the original that makes this game feel like a nice mix of historical and modern mechanics. On the flip side, the use of the smartphone removes all of the fun of having Bond use different gadgets to complete his objectives. And from a story standpoint, the changes to the narrative only weaken the memorable plot, but when it comes to the gameplay, it is really solid. Within the first level, it starts out similar to how the original game started, with a nice nod. Then the game switches into being more modern. Right after this, you are thrown into a firefight and then a set-piece rail shooting stage. This is very much in contrast with the original, where it offered complete hands-off exploration, and you could soak up the levels as you please with lots of player discovery. Then the game backs off a bit with this on-rail section and gives you a mostly linear part to enjoy. One nice thing is how you can opt to take one of two different paths, the direct route or a side route that lets you catch the enemies off guard. This is a small but appreciated choice. Goldeneye presents most of its action with the choice of tackling the area through loud action or with stealth. The choice is appreciated and adds a lot of replay value to many of the stages. What follows again with this first stage is more linear sections with hints of allowing for more exploration. It is small at this point, but it is appreciated what I found with the large amount of options for stealth and how enjoyable it is to play this way. More exploration is provided in this level as you keep going, with being able to even find a rocket launcher in the rear tower. Then we have a nice transition into the opening song. The first level is pretty good. The stealth is good along with the shooting. Stealth is my preferred way to play this game. This allows you to learn the areas and you are rewarded with your exploration. Silence weapons and takedowns are your main means to take out enemies out silently. When you need to go loud or if you get caught, the transition to more action-focused situations are fun as well. The game has a sort of first-person cover system that you can use. When you are crouched behind something, you will pop out of cover each time you aim down your sights. This is a great way to engage with the enemies more tactically, but the trade-off is that many pieces of cover can be destroyed, so you will need to move to another position. The shooting itself feels pretty good, with decent impact to your hits and reactions from your enemies. The one area that could be better is the sound effects. The sound effects are a bit mixed here, with some sounding like toys. The game offers the expected difficulty options to choose from. Within these, you will have regenerating health to go with its modernization. I feel like the best way to experience this game is through the 007 Classic mode. This features no regenerating health and relies on you to pick up body armor for additional protection. This inherently pushes you to play more tactically and think how you are going to complete the different situations. This also favors a playstyle that is more focused on stealth. The game is fun no matter which difficulty you choose, but the game is at its best when you choose this option, as it allows for the game to be a nice mix between old and new mechanics blended together. Along with this, you are required to complete additional objectives like in the original Goldeneye. Since 007 Classic is the highest setting, you get a more traditional health and armor system along with needing to complete additional objectives. This can range from finding objectives, hacking devices, or rescuing people. I am really glad that this feature returned from the original. My only issue with this is how the game will alert you to areas where you need to use your smartphone to complete an objective. This takes a lot of the player discovery element out of the system and makes it feel much more guided. I could understand doing this for the first few levels to get the player situated to this, but keeping this assistance throughout the entire game takes the fun out of that player discovery feeling of the original. I am sure the developers want to provide some guidance to the players instead of having them wander around aimlessly to find some of these objectives, but there was a great amount of satisfaction in the original on how you need to complete those levels. Along with this, the smartphone pretty much replaces all of Bond's gadgets. I can understand this from a practical element with this version being more modern, but it also makes it much more boring in its execution. The gadget elements to the Bond games allowed for some of that spy fantasy-like fun that is presented in the films, whether it is a watch that shoots a laser or a pen that is a grenade. Here you have a smartphone, and while I understand the use of this, it takes a lot of the fun out of Bond using his gadgets. I really want to praise some of the locations within the game as well. The first few levels have this excellent covert atmosphere. The main focus of the game is on its shooting and stealth. The stealth is mostly optional, but it's also very rewarding to go for this playstyle. In many cases, the action is separated into different chunks, so if you get detected in one area, you can try to be stealthy in the next. When it comes to the gameplay, it is really solid and very familiar to anyone who has played a Call of Duty game. Now, while I found the gameplay to be very enjoyable, there are a few issues that I had with it. The use of the cell phone substituting the gadgets sucks the fun out of these moments, and the game can be really handholdy when using the phone to complete the side objectives. One annoying aspect about the game is how you cannot skip any of the in-game cutscenes. This really hurts some of the replay value that this game provides. One thing that I did not like was how the game would tease vehicle sections, but after this point, the game would just fade to black or just be a quick time sequence. The first time this happens is when you are escaping and Bond gets on a motorcycle. I thought this was going to be a fun little vehicle set piece to close out the first set of missions with, but this was just a very short rail shooting stage and not very fun at that. This also happens again at the end of the club level. You fight your way through the club and it seems like the game is going to transition to a chase sequence, but Bond gets on the motorcycle and the level just ends. I thought these were big missed opportunities. Including short but fun driving sections would have been great for the variety, along with showing off Bond's skill set while driving. Lastly, the QuickTime events and QuickTime boss fights are not that fun, and I think these sort of things work much better in a third-person action game and not in a first-person shooter. And before we move on to the story, I want to mention that I am happy that they included their version of the tank level from the original. This is more of a linear level with bombastic action, but it helps to provide some nice variety and over-the-top fun. I just wish that there were more vehicle-based stages.
He's heading south.
When it comes to the story, it generally follows the same beats from the film. They did make changes to it, and I do not think any of them are for the better. For one, they changed the backstory as to why 006 betrays MI6. Where this was a more personal motivation in the original, the remake shifts this to focus on the banking crisis. The original story to this character was compelling and properly conveyed as to why he hated MI6. This new version is honestly boring and less interesting. Another bad choice was how the game chooses to kill off the character's Sokovsky right away. This was a fun, memorable part in the film, and in The World Is Not Enough, he helps to save Bond's life. But here, this character is introduced and then quickly killed off. I really do not understand why this was changed. There's a lot of stuff like this in the game. Onatopp is not as interesting, deadly, or as sexy as her film version. A lot of this is from how the actress portrayed her in the film, but in the game, she does not have the same charm to her. And lastly, it was a really odd decision to insert Daniel Craig's Bond into this game. I understand that this was probably a contractual obligation to only feature him, but if that was the case, then why remake Goldeneye in the first place? Just make a completely original story that is inspired by the original Goldeneye. The voice acting is a bit hit and miss, with some delivery being rather weak. When it comes to this new version of the story, it isn't as good as the original, and I really do wish that you could skip the cutscenes because of this. But from a gameplay standpoint, the Goldeneye remake is a solid shooter and one of the best on the Wii.
Come out! Throw down your weapon, and I'll let you live.
Don't do it, James. Don't listen to him.
Shut up!
The Goldeneye remake is a solid game with some missed opportunities. When it comes to the stealth and action, it's very enjoyable. Many of the levels allow for multiple approaches, and this all feeds back into the replay value. The 007 Classic difficulty is the best way to enjoy this game, as it allows for old elements to mix in well with modern shooting mechanics. The inclusion of the additional objectives on higher difficulties was appreciated as well. The smartphone takes a lot of the fun out of using the different gadgets within a Bond game, and the use of QuickTime events are not that fun. The story makes several changes to the narrative, and that does not improve the story in any way. I do think it was a missed opportunity to not include bots for the local multiplayer. The Goldeneye remake is not without its flaws, but it is a fun game and one of the best shooters on the Wii. Thank you very much for watching.